People talk about the Bush Doctrine, but not all agree on what it actually was. The fact is, it evolved over time as our nation was responding to the biggest crisis of our day.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
2003, the invasion of Iraq was on, but the conflict had been a long time in the making. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded and annexed Kuwait. America, under George H.W. Bush, forged a coalition that responded decisively, driving Iraqi forces out of Kuwait, but leaving Saddam Hussein still in charge in Baghdad. In 2000, George W. Bush ran as a compassionate conservative and concentrated on domestic issues. But the events of September 11th changed everything.
Good evening.
Bush responded that day.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
It was the first declaration of one of the pillars of what would come to be known as the Bush Doctrine.
The people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
In 2001, Bush's military response was to attack Afghanistan, where the ruling Taliban harbored the al-Qaeda leaders responsible for 9/11.
The president made the decision that we had to go on the offensive.
William Luty served as special assistant to the president for defense policy and strategy.
This meant a complete rethinking of our strategic doctrine when it came to fighting terrorism.
President Bush continued to develop his doctrine for fighting America's new threat.
The war on terror will not be won on the defensive. We must take the battle to the enemy, disrupt his plans, and confront the worst threats before they emerge.
It is not complicated. How do we prevent the next attack? And since we had adopted this wait until you're attacked and then send in the law enforcement folks, the president understood that this dynamic had to change.
March 20th, 2003, the U.S. invades Iraq. Baghdad fell in 3 weeks, but the insurgency would continue for years. Meanwhile, Bush was re-elected, and his doctrine continued to evolve.
The survival of liberty in our land increasingly depends on the success of liberty in other lands. The best hope for peace in our world is the expansion of freedom in all the world.
This is the capstone of the president's freedom agenda. The president essentially said that tyrannies, dictatorships, are inherently unstable, and when they implode, this causes a clear and present danger to the United States.
As the fighting dragged on and casualties mounted, the Iraq War became less popular here at home. Some politicians who had once supported it now turned against our involvement there.
That this war is lost.
Republicans suffered big losses in the 2006 midterms, and Democrats took the House and Senate. President Bush decided to double down, sending thousands of more troops into the war. The surge was generally opposed by the war's critics, including the junior senator from Illinois.
I'd express my clear and unequivocal opposition to an escalation of troop levels in Iraq.
But by the end of 2007, violence in Iraq was down to levels not seen since before the invasion. Nevertheless, the war was now widely seen as a mistake. And in 2008, Republicans lost the White House to a candidate who ran on his opposition to ever getting involved there.
The war had been won. Al-Qaeda had been defeated. Iraq was off on the process of political maturation and training and equipping its own military force. By the time President Bush had left office in 2009, I think it's generally accepted that Iraq had been stabilized.
One of the architects of the Iraq war strategy has strong feelings about why that stability didn't last. Next, Dick Cheney on Barack Obama.